What made you straight up nope out of a relationship? Wouldn't really call it a relationship, as it was only 3 dates. But I had met this girl at a wedding. She was a friend of a friend, and we shared numbers that night, texted for a while, and then had a date. First date was probably a big red flag, but I shrugged it off. We had connected on Facebook, and she noticed that she went to college with the girl I went to high school with. No big deal, until I found out she had been messaging that girl and asking her all these questions about me in high school. Who did I date, what car I drove, etc. Anyway, third date rolls around, and I wasn't really sure how long we would be together, so typically I wouldn't have taken her to a really nice restaurant so early in a relationship. But I was in the mood for steak, so I took her to a pretty high-end steakhouse. I have never been more embarrassed by someone's behavior in public in my life. And I have a 6- and 3-year-old at home now. She sent 3 martinis back because they weren't made correctly, while being extremely insulting and rude about it. She ordered a steak medium, and then got pissed because she insisted she ordered it medium rare. Both the waiter and I told her she had ordered medium. She was making comments about what other women in the restaurant were wearing, and not very subtly. Then, despite me trying to get out of there without buying her dessert, she got a dessert menu and expected them to make her something that they didn't have on the menu. They had cheesecake, and she wanted chocolate cheesecake. Another outburst at the staff. On the way out of the door, she made a point to stop and complain to someone loud enough that other customers could hear. When we got into my car, I was so embarrassed I pretended I had left my credit card on the table so I could go back in. I gave the waiter an extra $20 and apologized, telling him I was dumping her as soon as I got to her place. He laughed and told me that he wished he could see it. I didn't really give her a chance to say much. She called me a loser and stormed off. Haven't seen or heard from her since. Genuinely feared for my safety. I went over and we got in an argument, so I slept on the floor essentially. I went to the bathroom to text one of my buddies to come pick me up, since I thought she had fallen asleep. I suddenly got a text from her saying, "Where are you?" And my phone made a sound. I froze up and opened the bathroom door, and she was already standing there waiting for me in the darkness. She didn't say a word at all. She just stared at me until I walked by. I went back to my spot on the floor and got under the blanket and pretended to be going to sleep until she left. After about 30 minutes, I decided to peek out from under the covers, and she was literally towering over me in total darkness, with her eyes wide open the entire time. I got the F out of there so fast. I kept having to call the cops to calm down my wife after she became addicted to a slew of prescription drugs. I told her doctors that opiates for a ruptured vertebrae, stimulants for ADHD, Ambien most nights to help her sleep, and an assortment of others for anxiety and depression, and more to combat side effects, made her violent. One of the times I called the cops to calm the situation down during a bad episode just made me cry. All he had to say was that he had already been there, and asked when it would stop. I thought I'd been holding things together reasonably well. I had an office job where no one knew what was up, though my work had suffered greatly. I kept clothes and food in my trunk, just in case I had to stay out for a bit because she had decided I was part of the conspiracy. I had a gym on the way back to work, where I could shower or just have some downtime. I did all of our housework and errands, because she couldn't work or do much of anything most of the time. Each time she cut herself, she told the hospital it was an accident, and she always tried to go to a different one. We lived in a major metro, between hospitals. The cops saw through it. Being seen like that, and knowing that even that lifestyle was running out, hurt. I'm now recovering from the divorce and enjoying the calm. I still sometimes panic for no reason, and I feel more comfortable with clothes and food stashed in the trunk, but I feel much healthier. I get more sleep. My blood pressure has normalized, for the most part. I don't cry at work anymore. Married for 6 years. Started out thinking she just struggled with depression and anxiety sometimes, but things kept escalating. I walked away when she started threatening to stab me in my sleep. We had already tried several couples therapists and individual therapists, but she refused to consider medication. I called her to meet up and try to find some closure, but she cuts me off telling me I wasn't allowed to leave her, and as punishment, she was sleeping with 2 other guys. At that point, I just ignored her number and filed for divorce. Hope she's doing well, but glad to not be afraid for my life. Not wanting to be stabbed in your sleep equals reasonable boundary. Good decision. It was already on the rocks from roughly around the time the millionth drunken argument happened. However, the moment that sealed it was when she said something to me along the lines of, "If your dad wanted to be alive, he would still be here." My dad died in a car accident 3 years before that. Immediately went from loving her enough to make it work to thinking she was the most vile person on earth. I had a very long and toxic relationship with an ex. I had wanted to leave for years, but he would threaten to kill himself, and I would end up staying. I finally got the courage to walk away when I was diagnosed with several liver tumors and was told by the doctor that it was very important with this type of tumor to immediately and permanently stop taking hormonal birth control. I researched it on my own and confirmed the single most important thing I could do to avoid further complications was to stop taking normal hormonal birth control for good. I told my then husband about the appointment, and he said, so calmly, "Well, that's going to be a problem." I was like, "What do you mean? I'll go to the gyno as soon as I can get an appointment, and we can just use condoms until then." Nope, condoms were unacceptable because we were married, and not having sex until I got to the gyno was also unacceptable. What really made my blood run cold, though, was when he suggested that I should continue to take birth control as normal and just not tell the doctor. "He'll never know," he said. Then he went on to suggest maybe I can go on and off birth control so I'd be off of it before any follow-up appointments with his doctor, to ensure that he'd never know. I was totally stunned, and I just looked at him and said, "You understand this could kill me. This isn't about placating a doctor. This is about my life." He just shrugged and said he wasn't using condoms and that I needed to figure it out. I did figure it out. I left him more than a decade ago and have never been happier. She wanted our relationship to be exclusive but secret. Oh boy, thanks for the flashbacks. My ex was in the closet, so in the 2 years we were together, I know, way longer than it should have lasted, I never met his family, most of his friends. We only hung out in my apartment, never officially dated because he wanted me to have a six-pack first. Even when he came out of the closet, he never mentioned me to his family, broke up with me with a Facebook chat, and then will still try to be with me and get mad if I was with someone else. I'm sorry, I cracked up at wanted me to have a six-pack first. Glad you're out of there. I was dating a woman who was previously married, and her ex had a 2-year-old child together. One night, she tells me of this plan to coach her daughter to claim this guy had molested her because she wanted full custody and didn't want this guy around anymore. I decided right then to bounce right the F out of that relationship. Edit to bring closure. Yes, I did call and tell the father of her plan. As far as I know, she never actually went through with it, but she did attempt to have drugs planted on him. Not sure how that eventually turned out. I had been dating her for a year, but after that conversation, I ghosted her. Just straight up cut all contact. As a family law attorney, I have to say this is depressingly common. The amount of stories I have of one parent making knowingly false and horrible accusations against the other for purposes of trying to secure custody could fill a book. The one I am most reminded of by your comment happened a few years back. I represented a mom who had primary custody of her kid. The dad had the kid on altering weekends. IIRC. Anyway, the dad got mad when my client, who had divorced him 3 years prior, started dating a new guy. A few months into the relationship, my client, her boyfriend, and the child were woken up by the police pounding on their door in the middle of the night. The cops detained and interrogated the boyfriend, while a social worker interviewed the child. Apparently, the police had received an anonymous report that the boyfriend had been molesting the child. It was clear within minutes to both the police and the social worker that the report was false. The boyfriend had never once even been alone with the child, let alone abused them in any way. My client was 100% positive her ex-husband had made the allegation to the police, and further interviews with the child by social workers and therapists made clear that the dad, seemingly upset about the mom moving on with her life, had sat the child down and started asking effed up questions about the mom's new boyfriend doing sexual things to them. When the child didn't answer the way the dad wanted them to, he screamed at and berated the child, and went so far as to withhold food. Still, the child, who had a great relationship with the boyfriend, thankfully, refused to repeat the dad's lies about him. We presented testimony from the social workers in court, and the judge tore the dad a new one. He went from having around 25% custody of his kid to getting 2 hours of professionally supervised visitation per month.